Hi everyone, I'm Karen with Adventures in Wisdom, and today I'm speaking with Jean Gibson, one of our life coaches for kids. Jean is based in the UK and has been a wisdom coach since 2018. Her goal is to help children and young people to realize their potential, to learn growth mindset skills that empower them, and to provide them with the tools and ability to live their best lives. She has a specialty in working with children, young people, and families who are living with ADHD, autism, anxiety, and challenging behaviors. Welcome, Jean.
Hi, Karen.
I'm so excited about talking with you today, especially since you have a specialty in ADHD. So that's one of the areas I'm really going to want to talk with you about. But first, I would like to just open up the floor and have you explain a little bit about how you got into life coaching for kids and how you found Adventures in Wisdom.
It's interesting because I started out by training to qualify as a life coach for adults. Children hadn't factored into my life coaching journey at all. And then I think probably a couple of years into my life coaching business, I realized I really wanted to niche, and I wanted to find an area that I felt really passionate about. So I was a life coach and I was a career coach, working with adults who were changing or building their careers. But I've got children, I have 4 children, and I have a number of grandchildren as well. And I could see that there was a need for children to have something else. I could see that there was a gap. And I think I was just surfing. I was looking at the internet and I was looking for different opportunities, and I came across Adventures in Wisdom. And when I learned about the stories, I mean, the whole thing, I think I had hairs coming up because I was excited, but I could see how powerful, I hadn't experienced the power, but I could see how powerful the system was in terms of the stories and the way the program worked. And so that was my first introduction to coaching for children, because I'd never heard of it before. I didn't know that it was a thing. So yeah, when I found Adventures of Wisdom, I was ecstatic, and I knew that that was something that I wanted to follow up and to find out more about and to see whether I could integrate it into my business.
Wonderful. So one of the things that I have heard from many coaches is, this idea of, why didn't we learn these skills when we were kids? And they wanted to be able to share these skills with children. Had you, because you do have children and grandchildren, at what point did you start your own personal development journey? Did you try to share skills with your kids or grandkids before you found Adventures in Wisdom? Maybe could you share just a little bit about your experience with mindset skills and personal development before finding Adventures in Wisdom?
I think I worked in human resources in my corporate career, and so I've always been on a journey of developing myself in whatever way I need to. So coaching was something that I was doing as part of my day job. I was always attending various self-development courses. And in terms of my children, I've always been the person they come to when either they're in a challenging situation, if they're not sure of something, I help them with their CVs. I was kind of that go-to person for friends and families when it came to their careers and their developing their careers. So it's something that I've always had a passion to do anyway. And I started out doing it without being paid. I wasn't running a business doing it. And then as I started to think about a new career going forwards, once I took redundancy from my day job, then I realized it was something that I do and get paid for. In a way that I can help people to progress in their careers. So self-development has been something that's always been with me.
Wonderful. And when you came across Adventures in Wisdom, what was it about Adventures in Wisdom that you liked about it?
It was the whole package. The fact that there was a package to start with, that there was a structure. I love that there's the curriculum. So you can see that you have the 27 stories or topics, and behind that, it's just the wealth of information. I was astounded when I first saw it, because I couldn't believe that there was just so many resources available to you that would actually help you to develop and to build your business. And obviously to begin with, it was a bit daunting because there is so much information and you're not sure how you're going to put it together. But the fact that all of that information was available to me is what sold me on, investing in that package.
Tell me, do you have a favorite story or stories that you use in your coaching?
One of my favourites that I tend to put into most of my programs is the best friends forever, being your own BFF. Yes. I think that is just so profound and so important for everybody to recognise, that the importance of being your own best friend first. So that story typically goes into most of my programs, regardless of what the child needs or the young person needs.
Well, I was blown away when I was looking at you can download a free story on the website, and that it's actually the whole skill book, and it starts with an activity, and then it's got a story, and then it's got discussion questions, and then it's got like 3 or 4 other activities that you can have, and that's just in the children's guide, and then there's a mentor's guide. It's incredible how complete that lesson is, and that's just one of 27. So I
absolutely
understand why that would be a popular one for you, for sure. I would love to know more about the types of programs that you offer to kids. Do you do group? Do you do in person? Do you one-on-one, online? Or yes, tell us a little bit about how you help kids and young people and teens.
When we were doing in-person or face-to-face sessions, I've run a couple of small group sessions, workshops for children, and I did a session on bullying. Beat the Bullies is what I called it. Wow. And I did one on, and I've also gone into a couple of schools and delivered on goal setting. And going in when I've actually tagged on the back of an organisation who's going in and mentoring young people. I think it was year 10, so they're 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And so they were being mentored over a period of time, and I would go in and do a session on goal setting, and I was able to use the goal setting from the Dream Power curriculum and go through that and use that as that tool to help the children to think about goal setting and how to do goal setting, and use the story from that and the resources from that pack just to deliver that session. So I've done a few group sessions. My real passion is working one-on-one, because that's when I feel I can add the most value in that. I feel like I'm really helping a child to understand themselves better and to empower them to be the best that they can be. Although having said that, I am going back to doing some more group sessions as well, because there's the one thing about helping an individual child, but there's also the fact that you can help more children at the same time. So I'm trying to balance, it's not about the quantity, so I'm not looking for 10s, and 20 children. If I can do a small group of 4 children that I can focus on and give as much attention as possible, plus doing my one-to-one clients. I love that.
And have you been doing work online? Yeah, have you been doing?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have been doing work online. It's really interesting because one of my most significant clients, I started out just before, it was 2019, she came to me and we did 3 sessions face-to-face. I went to her house. So I used to go to see my clients in their homes, and we managed to fit in 3 sessions before I went away. So I like to travel. So my business is around me being able to work from wherever I want to in the world. That's kind of how I want to run my business. And we did 3 sessions face-to-face, and we did lots of activities, and that was great. And then we worked online. I was in the Caribbean and she was here in the UK, and the sessions worked beautifully because I was there for 3 months, and the sessions worked beautifully. And so when the pandemic hit, it wasn't an issue for me because I was already working online with my clients.
I love that. And I love that you have the flexibility and the lifestyle that you want, and that you're able to help people in person and online. But do you have a couple of success stories that you could share with us about some of the coaching experiences you've had?
Of course. one of the most profound success stories is with a 10-year-old girl. Her mother came to me. In fact, I'm going to read you what the mother said in the message that I received from her. It was an email, and it came through, and it said, "My 10-year-old daughter is showing very sad and worrying anxiety symptoms. This has been every day this week, first thing in the morning. Getting her to school has been hard. The school are aware and have been supportive, but we need help." So that was the message that I received in my email. She had found me through a friend or a parent in the playground had seen my advert in a magazine. So there's a magazine called Families, and it's for children it goes out to the primary schools in the UK in various areas. So I was promoting myself in that magazine. I had an advert. And so somebody had seen my advert, had spoken to this mum who was going through this challenging period and recommended me to her. She looked at my website, and then she sent me a message through my website to
Wonderful.
speak to me.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your experience helping the 10-year-old girl.
Yeah, so this young girl, she was very sad, she was very anxious, and not just anxious and scared. She was very scared, but she was physically being sick. She was passing out. She wasn't eating. She didn't want to go anywhere. You know, she became quite reclusive. The whole family was impacted by this. So she would wake up in the middle of the night, or she'd wake up early in the morning. She'd throw up. She wouldn't eat breakfast. Going to school was a challenge because she was scared to go to school. She had been bullied a bit in earlier years at school, and so her mum thought that was also an issue. But there seemed to be a lot going on, and initially I was worried, thinking, is this program going to be powerful enough to help her? And I asked the mother about, had she been to the doctor and had she spoken to any other organisations for help? And she said that she had been to the doctor and that she had spoken to other organisations, because we talked a bit about ADHD and autism, and there are organisations here that you can reach out to. But the mother wasn't getting, from the doctor said that she needed some kind of support. She's been to the doctor before and after she had spoken to me. And after she had spoken to me, she told the doctor that she was being coached, the daughter was being coached. And he said that's a really good thing to do. And he supported the work that I was doing with her and felt that would help her, because there were no other signs. She wasn't physically ill, but some kind of fear, the anxiety was causing her to react in the way she was.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the beginning in terms of what I was dealing with. And so I use the intake forms as part of one of the resources in the pack, and I think it's a brilliant form, and it always gives me all the information that I need from a client. And going through the intake form with the parents, because both the mother and the father were there at the time, I was able to, and knowing the curriculum, I was able to put together in my head I identified the key issues that I heard, and then use the curriculum, I was able to formulate a program. And basically what I felt was it was down to her building her self-confidence, her self-esteem, and just generally her resilience and self-belief. Mm-hmm. And so I put together a program, an initial program. I created two programs. One was what I called an introduction to resilience, and the second was an advanced resilience program. And they're all stories from the Adventures in Wisdom curriculum. So the first program is building resilience, or it's the introduction to building resilience. And I start out by talking about how your mind shapes your world, which I think is important, and it helps them to understand that their mind is what makes them believe what they believe. And if they can take control of that, they can shape their thoughts. And so it was about her being able to understand that she had control over that she needed to think supportively about what she felt about herself. So how your mind shapes your world was the first session that we had. The second session I used two stories. The first one was about building neural pathways. And I felt that was important because it was about her understanding why she felt nervous doing new things, going to new places. And so she learned she learned about neural pathways and how she could use that to her advantage when new things were happening in her life, and how she could trick her brain into feeling that it had done it before, because it creates a new pathway for her. And then I used The Secret Behind Self-Esteem and Self-Confidence to create your pathway to success. And I used both of those stories so that she could learn how to use the power of positive self-talk to create positive beliefs about herself and to create strong self-esteem. And that she would also learn about what she says to herself was the most important thing. Because she was so anxious, and because she had felt so low, her self-esteem was rock bottom. And so we were able to slowly build that up by thinking about positive statements that she could say about herself, for her to remember the positive things that she had achieved in her life. And she had achieved some things, and she had goals and things that she wanted to achieve as well. So from that, session 3 then was about the power of possibility and why you achieve what you believe. And this is helping them to see what's possible for her life. Yeah, I believe, and I think it's part of the program, is that, you know, it doesn't matter what we as adults say to children, they have to believe it for themselves. And throughout the program, you know, I worked with this young girl for over a year, and it was about enabling her to see how she could apply these skills in her life. I was just reading back before this session and looking at some of the comments that she had made throughout some of the coaching sessions we had. You know, and she would say one of the things that she said she enjoyed was seeing how she could apply or use the skills in her life and see how it applied to her life. So to me, that is one of the most powerful things that I know that this young lady valued, was that she was not just listening to a story because she enjoyed stories, but she could see how it could change things for her too. And that to me is the power behind this whole system. It's absolutely wonderful. So she learned that she can achieve whatever it is she believes. And so it was getting her to believe those positive things about herself. Then we talked, session 4 was about managing fear and how to create courage and bust outside of your comfort zone. And so this is the Slaying Dragons module. And so we talked about the story, but it was for her to understand what things was she scared of, what was she fearful of, and how she could overcome those things, you know. And we went through the solutions or the strategies in the story, to talk about her fears, to understand what it was she was afraid of, and to think about how she can make those things better. What could she do? So she had a strategy, she had a plan of things that she could actually think about the next time she felt fearful of it, and then to visualize the things that she could do and visualize it going well. So she had something concrete she could go away and do. The 5th session was how to be the boss of me. And this is a story about Victor, who thinks that he's always being told off and being told what to do by his mum or his teacher or everybody. But actually realizing that by recognizing the things that they can be responsible for and taking responsibility for those things, they're actually being the boss of themselves. And one of the activities that I do with that is that I get them to create 3 what I call task cards. So to think about 3 things they can take responsibility for, write those on a card, and they can either keep them for themselves or give them to their parents or whoever it is, and say, well, when I've done that, can you give it back to me? Or can we put it in a box? Or we create some place that they can count them up at the end of the week, perhaps, to get a reward for it. It's up to them how they use it, and they can have that conversation with their parents, but it gives them something concrete to work towards. And I know she found that really valuable as well. Then we talked about visualization in its entirety, and, you know, how visualization works and how powerful that is, you know. And she talked about because she wants to be a singer. That was one of her, that's one of her goals for the future. She's got a beautiful singing voice, you know, but visualizing that, visualizing the activities that she wanted to do, visualizing meeting with her friends and how to do that activity and how powerful that skill is that helps her to move through fear. She had a lot of fear inside her about school and about friendships. And at that time, when I first met her, she was fearful of almost everything. And I think the visualization really helped her to think about how she wanted things to be. So she wasn't so fearful when she attempted that activity or she went to a new place. So it was really powerful. A lot of the time, this young lady created a vision board, but what she did was on her wall, in her hallway. So she created like the mirror mantra with the positive words. She cut out the words. I sent her some of these. I've got these little shapes, kind of like clouds, word clouds and things. And I sent her the template and she cut those out and she stuck them on the wall. So their hallway was filled with all of these positive statements, because we talked about affirmations at a later date. And all of these positive statements, she put them on the wall, and her mum would send me pictures of this. So I've got pictures of all the things that she had, and she had a mirror. So she really took on board the activities and really embedded it in her life. Not only did she do it, but her mum and her dad really supported her. And one of the things that I found powerful in terms of, and I kind of learned this through this process with her in particular, was the importance of sharing what I was doing with the parents in terms of the topics and the language that we were using, because the mother now uses the language. And that really supports the child in learning and retaining what they're going through with me, the stories that they're learning. And I found that really cool. We then talked about managing change and how to embrace change and thrive. And this was a really big one for her. As I said, you know, she was going through quite a bit of change. So she was 10, going on 11. And so she did this first program she did with me. She was in primary school, but then there was a period when she was doing the transition into secondary school. And so I did a program with her where I took her across that transition period. So this first program was kind of the lead up to it. So she was getting the foundation, learning the foundation skills. And then the second program helped to embed those skills further and give her some additional skills. And when it came to her transitioning into secondary school, it was a matter of just reinforcing what she'd already learned. I didn't then bring in new skills, we just reinforced and used what she'd already learned. So managing change was really powerful.
Sorry, Jean, how did her transition to secondary school go?
It went really well. It went very smoothly, in fact. Transition happened, I think it was lockdown. So we were in lockdown at the time. So she had been at home for a while and she was a bit nervous. We weren't doing a wisdom program. So she'd done 2 of my wisdom programs. And then the actual transition period was, I gave them 10 coaching sessions. So during that time, we would either refer to one of the wisdom stories we'd done previously, depending on the conversation we were having, depending on how she was feeling. But the transition went really well. I would talk to her every week. We'd talk about what happened at school, how she was feeling about it. If she didn't have anything to talk about, if she had no concerns, I'd refer to one of the stories we'd talked about previously. So I was able to just help her transition to secondary school. It went really well. Went very well. Yeah. And then the final step in this the first program was affirmations. And I said, you know, she used those clouds, the word clouds, to write affirmations, and all over their hallway has all of these positive affirmations that she's learned how to write those, and she's continued to use those all the time. So that was the first session, and then I created what I called my advanced resilience program. And so there are a couple in here, or there's at least one that's repeated. So we repeated the power of self-responsibility, how to be the boss of me, because I thought that was worth repeating as a valuable reminder that it's down to you to take 100% responsibility, and that you have that choice, whether you're going to be a victim or you're going to stand in your power. And then we talked about choosing integrity, you know, what you do when no one else is looking. No one will know Nelson is the story behind that one. And initially I wondered whether that would be valuable, because there were no indications that she would do something wrong. But I felt it was important for her to have this as a basis, a kind of a fundamental layer to the things that are important to her, to understand those. So yeah, we did choosing integrity, and then we did making your mark with respect. And so we did the making your mark with respect and then making your mark with self-respect. And again, this is another one of my, I've got lots of favourites. This is another favourite of mine, because I use it with younger children as well, and it's so powerful for them to understand the golden rule. And she enjoyed that. And what I used, one of my activities that I used for that, I created these hearts and marks. I don't know if you can see that. I can send you that. So they can use this however they want, cut them out, and then they can either use it that they give it when they give a heart, or they can cut them out, give them to their parents and say, when I do something respectful, can you give me a heart? Or it goes in a jar or a box, whatever it is, so that they can keep track of when they're being respectful and when they're being disrespectful. So it kind of helps them learn how to understand what respect means. And one of the other things that I really like about the stories and the curriculum is it gives them the language. And that's something that the parents picked up on, is that often children don't know how to express themselves. They don't know what words to use to express themselves. And the stories gives them the language to use. It really helps them to understand, well, what does respect mean? If you say be respect, what does that mean? But it could be something as simple as rolling your eyes. Some children think, gosh, is that being disrespectful? But actually it is. And so them learning those specifics, I think, is just so powerful. Again, slamming the door, that's disrespectful.
Yeah.
You know, talking back, all of those things. But it's nice to be able to lay it out, you know, be specific about what these things are, because sometimes children don't understand it. And sometimes I deal with children who have learning difficulties. Again, for them, it's even more challenging. So being able to say, well, this is what it means. This is what being disrespectful means. I'm going to interrupt slightly. I'm going to change the story slightly, that my grandson has ADHD, and the hearts and marks is one of the most powerful stories that I've used with him. And he always wants to have the hearts. He always wants to build up hearts. And whenever he sees me, even now, because, you know, one of the traits or one of the symptoms of ADHD is having a forgetful memory, not having a very good memory, but he always remembers the hearts. He always says, Nanny, I've got 10 hearts, or however many hearts he's got. He understood. If I said I was going to take a heart away, he understood what that meant. He understood that he had been disrespectful. That was the power behind that. So the next session 5 in this advanced program, was how to make good decisions, choosing what you want for you. And again, another really good story for children to understand how important it is to make good decisions, but also what can happen. And the story in there about cheating, you know, cheating at tests, etc., is a really good indication. And also thinking about it in terms of peer pressure. Which was the next story down. So how to make good decisions was session 5, and then session 6 was standing up to peer pressure and how to say yes to you and no to peer pressure. And again, both two really strong, powerful stories, especially again for children with learning difficulties, but for children generally, I think, to understand that they can say no and it's okay, and that they don't have to just follow their friends. And the story of Charlie, and the fact that Charlie stands up and decides that he doesn't want to do some of the things his other friends are doing, and that his other friend that does follow the group, they get into trouble, and the impact of that. So yeah, I just love this. Sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent. Session 7 was the law of attraction. So this was about what we think about is what we bring into our lives. Yeah, and so this is about having the power of positive thinking. yeah, and bringing positive energy and introducing tools of visualization. We talk about visualization again, affirmations, gratitude also. And so what we're doing is that we're training our brains for success. We're bringing positive energy into our lives. And then the final 2 sessions in this advanced are how an attitude of gratitude prepares you for your dreams. And the final one is I honor me, how to be yourself and honor your uniqueness. So the gratitude one was important for, and again, I read feedback to me, you know, she realizing that she should be grateful for what she has, and understanding how important that is to be grateful for what you have, but also to recognize that it's okay to be different, that we're all unique, and that is okay, and that is fine. And the story of the sun, the wind and the rain is a really good story to indicate, you know, if we were all the same, you know, life would be really boring, but it could also be quite detrimental also. And so it's important that we recognize that we've all got strengths and the value of those strengths. So yeah, that is that program. That was the advanced program. And I've also used that program with a 21-year-old. So although my initial example was with a 10-year-old who moved into 11-year-old, I've used the same program. I think I might have tweaked 1 or 2 of the stories out, but as a 21-year-old, she found it valuable. Again, she was somebody with low self-esteem, low self-confidence, didn't know how to communicate effectively, wasn't assertive, and was having a really difficult time. She works, and she was having a difficult time at work. And her mum was really struggling because she relied on her mum. She was very withdrawn. But, you know, I talked to her about the stories and I said, you know, it's a story, but take the learning from it. And we focused on the skill that I was putting across. And so I would read the stories, we would talk about the stories, and then we would apply it to her life and see how she could adapt and adopt those skills. So my view is that these stories, this curriculum, this wonderful system works right across the board. There have been instances where I may have been coaching an adult client and I've maybe have just come off coaching a child using subconscious and your conscious mind, and I'll be able to relate the same story because it applies. So the lessons and the strategies in the curriculum are very powerful and can be applied to adults as well as children. And I know the parents have said to me, I wish I'd had these when I was their age. I wish I'd learned what they're learning now.
Yeah, so true, isn't it? What inspired you to, with a 21-year-old, what actually inspired you to take her through the same program that you had developed for the 10-year-old? Like, what made you think, oh, let's use Adventures of Wisdom on this woman who it sounds like she was kind of failing to launch in some ways, or, you know, struggling to really, yeah.
I think because I could see the similarities with the issues or the challenges that she was facing. You know, I listened to the language that the parents use and the language that the child uses, and to me, it's about what is it that they need, and the stories they give what she they gave her what she needed. They gave her examples that I talked to the mother about whether there were any learning difficulties, and she hasn't been diagnosed, but she suspected that there is a level of learning difficulties. She's got no label or name attached to it, but I could also tell that there were probably some challenges in the learning development area. So I knew that the system would work for her in that instance, because it would give her the story, would enable her to visualize the skill and to hear it being acted out and played out. Even now when I talk to, because I'm still coaching her, we can refer to a story. I have to share an example for her to understand it. I can't just talk. So a bit with ADHD, sometimes it's difficult for them to process information and to visualize it, depending on their brain and how their brain is working, but to actually visualize. So the story helps them to visualize what it is you're talking about. And then you can talk about their life, what's going on for them, and to show them the similarities. And that's why I felt that she would benefit from this story as well. So I will always refer to if I'm coaching a young person, probably up to about 21, I will refer to the wisdom system to see if I can use that in some way to support them. But that's part of the beauty of what we do, is that we can tailor the program that we give to be shared with young people based on what they need, because they may not need they don't need every story, but what they do need to learn are the strategies the story is trying to show them. And that's what I say to the older children, because you get a 12 or 13-year-old boy perhaps, and I've had a couple, and you think, are they going to buy the story? But actually, when I say to them, look, forget that it's a story, just think about what it is you need to learn from this story. Yeah, and that's how I place it with them, position it with them, and then we'll talk about the story and what they learned from the story afterwards. So I'll pick out the bits that are relevant, that we need to discuss, that helps them.
That makes sense. And I think part of what I'm hearing from you is that it's not about age, it's about the issues. And if someone has an issue, whether it's anxiety or whatnot, and then you use the wisdom system to be able to address that. So how do you help a child with ADHD? In fact, we had a webinar the other day that Renee did, and somebody asked the question, well, what about kids with ADHD? Like, will they sit through a session? How do you keep them engaged? So can you share, because I know you're really passionate about this area and you're even writing a book about this area. So can you share a little bit more about how you work with people who have ADHD? Because I'm sure they're not all kids.
No. Well, it's either ADHD or autism. I've coached a couple of children who are autistic as well, or diagnosed with autism through the coaching. I suppose firstly you need to understand the symptoms of ADHD, and each child is different, and so there'll be different things that they can cope with. My grandson has ADHD. That's where I got to learn that it was a thing. I didn't know, I had never heard about it before. And he was 7 when he was diagnosed. He's still only very young now. He's only just 9 now. So it's only been a few years. And he came to some of the workshops with me. So he has ADHD. He also has dyspraxia, which is kind of your motor control. So getting dressed is difficult for him, tying his shoelaces, that type of things, where you're using even sometimes his ability to stand straight. Sometimes he bumps into things. So the ADHD, he is hyperactive. He always was, but now we understand why. He's easily distracted. He is very, very sensitive. And so working with him and working with those with ADHD, and again, it depends on the individual, but it's about making sure that they are constantly engaged. So an example would be, and in one of the workshops I did, there were 4 of them, 4 children. He was the youngest. And to start with, he sits in his chair and he's okay, and he'll listen to the story. But then I'll have to bring him into the story to make sure that I'm calling his name, so he knows that I'm focusing on him, so he's getting some attention. After a while, he can't sit till he has to get up. So I'll get him to come and stand with me, and he'll be my helper. These were when we were doing the in-person. So he'd come and he'd be my helper. He might hold my Wyatt doll, or if I'm on the whiteboard, or I've got the whiteboard up, he'll do some writing on the whiteboard. He'll become my helper. So I have to make sure that he is kept engaged totally. I also was coaching a young boy online, and there were times when I could only see the top of his head, because he would be lying down and I could just see the top of his head in the screen. And to begin with, I mean, I was still quite early days, and I was still learning about the conditions and the different aspects to it. And I used to think that maybe he's not listening, that he heard everything. He was listening to me. But with autistic children, sometimes they don't like the eye contact, and looking down, it made him feel more comfortable. And so I would just go with the flow with what he needed, but I would constantly ask questions to make sure they were engaged, ask what they thought, We've now got the bingo, which is great, so that you can give them a bingo sheet. So they're listening to the story and they're looking for the words. But the key thing I think that I've found with working with ADHD is keeping them engaged, using their name, being sensitive to what they need. You know, if a child is hyperactive, keeping them sitting for too long isn't going to work necessarily. I keep my coaching sessions online are about 45 minutes. And if I can do something where they're getting up, then I'll get them to do that. It may just even be just a breathing exercise, maybe a stretching in between. But if you as long as you're keeping them constantly engaged in the conversation, I use my hearts. I was looking at my board because I've got on top of my board of hearts, and I told you that my grandson likes to collect the hearts for the respect. And so if he starts to play up a little bit, I'll point heart and say, does that heart need to move down? Does it need to move down some? Am I taking that away? And he's like, no, and he'll sit up again. So it's finding something that's going to keep him engaged online, which is obviously more challenging.
So Jean, you're the first person that I've talked with who has talked about working with kids with autism. So how did you come to work with somebody or kids with autism, and what is it like coaching a child with autism? Like, you gave the example about the eye contact, so that was a really interesting one, but I'm just curious about that.
Well, I didn't know to begin with. I was recommended through an ex-work colleague, somebody that she knew who had a 12-year-old son who was struggling. He didn't have any friends. He had a real problem with his weight and his health. She was also in a situation where she had remarried, and so he was having problems with in terms of his relationship with his biological dad. And yeah, he was just sad. Again, a very sad. If you think about the words and the language that I use, there's quite a theme going on. The children are sad, they are anxious, they're lonely, they're withdrawn. Sad is a really powerful word for me, and it really triggers something to think that there's a child that is sad, and if I can help that child. So, I go along and I talk to the parents, and then I talk to the child to see whether I think I can coach them or not. And he was a lovely boy. He loved reptiles, spiders, snakes that I didn't. He was very knowledgeable. But he loves the stories. He enjoyed the stories, and he would engage with me in the stories. His facial expression, I didn't know too much about autism at the time, but I was kind of learning. His facial expression, he wasn't very expressive. He didn't smile very much, which I did find a challenge to begin with. But the fact that he engaged with the stories, one of the problems he had was that he found it difficult to sleep at night. He was quite fearful, and he found it difficult to sleep at night. And by the end, I had 6 coaching sessions with him, and mostly around the Slaying Dragons module. And he could sleep with the light off in his room at the end of it. That's one of the things I remember from coaching him.
Wow.
Mum said he was much happier. And but one of the other things that I find is coaching these young children, is that it's not just about them, it's about the whole family, and how the whole family's transform, the family's relationship, it transforms, because they all go from being stressed and frustrated and not knowing what to do, feeling helpless, to having fun, being happy, being relaxed, being able to enjoy each other's company again. There's, reduced conflict, that changes. So that's why I found
having tools helps, doesn't it? So
absolutely, yeah. It really does. But there's, you do need to think about how you apply the stories, because I don't do it the same way for every child, because obviously every child is different. Sometimes, if I'm doing an in-person one, then they can read it and I can read it with them. Obviously online we've got the audio, so we can listen to it together. but yeah, I try to tailor it based on what the child's needs are and the way the child likes to engage with me. The 21-year-old I mentioned, she liked colouring. So I sent her some of the images. We have, I know in the programme we have some of these sheets that have got some powerful statements on, yeah? And this one says, at any moment you have the power to say, this is not how the story is going to end. That's just one of them, but some really great, powerful statements. And I would send her ones that were appropriate to the story we were doing, and then she could colour them. Yeah, she enjoyed that. So if there's a child that enjoys doing that, then I will send them the appropriate resources so that it engages them in the story.
So Jean, have you used the Business Accelerator or any of the business and marketing tools that have been provided as part of the Adventures in Wisdom program?
Yes, I use all of the resources. So my go-to is the intake form and the life rating wheel that I use for kids. I use that with all of my clients, and I use the completion form as well. So that brings them in, and then that's the kind of closing of the session. I use the stories and the mentor's guides. I normally use the mentor's guides as preparation before a session. And I use all of the activities. Looking at the members, at the business, it's called the business, or the business tools. I use the ones that I need to, in order for me to run my business. I use the images, I use the logo, I use it on my website and on most of the marketing resources that I produce. So yeah, everything is there for me. So yeah.
Do you use some message makers as well? So the little descriptions about the different programs and that sort of thing?
I do, because so when I send out the programs to the parents, after we've done the general conversation, I then send them a document, an A4 document, listing the different sessions, each of the sessions, and I use the message makers in those sessions so they can see that it helps me with the language, so they can see what each session will be about. So I use the message makers in those.
So Jean, I understand that you are writing a book, especially inspired by the work and the results that you've been getting with kids who have ADHD. Can you tell us a little bit about this book that you're writing?
Thank you. Yes, my book is called The ADHD Support Handbook, and I was inspired to write the book based on my grandson's experience with ADHD so far, and also because I'd spoken to many parents and realised that actually there is either so much information that you don't know where to look, or there's not enough information. And so what I've tried to do with this book is to share my grandson and my daughter's story, but also provide information about what you can do, where you can go to find information, various sources of information, and things that you can do to help you to empower your child. I've also included an element in there around the hearts and marks story in terms of respect and the value that the Adventures in Wisdom system has in working with children who have ADHD. But I'm basing it on our experience. So as it says, it's a real life experience of supporting and empowering a child with ADHD and how we've moved through the process, and basically what I've learned from talking to various other parents and the research that I've done. So, and I know that the parents that have read it already relate to what we're saying, what I'm saying in the book. So I believe it will be of value. Any longer, there's just a couple of things that I use. In the hang on, let me find the correct story. It's the how your mind shapes your world. One of the activities is to create a paper aircraft or an airplane with supportive beliefs on it, and this is just one of mine that I create. So I this A4 piece of paper and how to do that. But I've also found I found these that are quite cute, I thought. So I sent these out, to clients as well. These are my power goggles.
Oh, I love it.
I send those out to kids as well. So they get one of these. So they'll get a pack from me and I'll put some different things in it. This is what I use, a template that I use for doing the mirror mantras. So be your own best friend.
Yes.
I've got this template and I've also got some, I put some here. I found some real ones, some little ones that can be decorated. I use...
You get your own little goodie bag.
Choose integrity. Choose integrity story. So this is about, you know, when you've done something wrong, or you've lost trust with somebody, or you've lost trust with maybe your parents, for example, and that you can't see through it. Yeah. And this is what it's like when you have got trust. It's clear. And to get from here back to here again, to regain that trust, can take a while. And I think the idea is that you'd either put it in a bucket or in a bath, and you'd see how many glasses of water it would take to make this red one clear again. Yeah, so I can do that online, and it works online. So that's quite a good one. So those were the only other things that I wanted to share in terms of resources that I use.
I'm really glad you shared those. Those are awesome. So I want one of these care packs. That's so cool. Okay. Jean, do you participate in the Facebook group that is the coach Facebook group?
Yes, I do. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant group. It's fantastic to have such an open, supportive community. And I also support other new coaches in there. And if I can answer a question or support somebody just to say, well done, or, you know, you're doing okay, or to give them some my thoughts on something, then I will do, because that group has been there for me. Brilliant community. I've made some friends in there as well, and I know that if I need something, I can turn to that group and ask a question if I need to without worrying. I feel very safe being part of that group.
But congratulations on the work that you're doing, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I think
I'm passionate about this, and I feel that I found my calling, if you want to put it that way. That's great. I'm where I should be. I'm doing what I should be doing.
Well, the way you light up, you can tell.